Hello and welcome to the LGBTQ plus Scouts and Allies speaker series. I'm Allison Beatty. I'm the general manager of New England Base Camp Express, as well as the founding member of the LGBTQ plus Scouts and Allies Volunteer Resource Group. This group was founded out of the Spirit of Adventure Council in Eastern Massachusetts, helping volunteers to support Scouts of all kinds who identify as LGBTQ plus. Tonight, we are so incredibly excited to be hosting Mike Curato to discuss his book, Flamer, as well as his other works and his time in Scouting. Before I introduce Mr. Curato, I'd like to remind everyone that this event will be free of any harassment to Mr. Curato or participants. This virtual event will be fully monitored to foster connection and immediately shut down any negative interaction. We expect all participants to maintain an atmosphere of respect. Anyone who violates this standard of behavior will be immediately removed at the discretion of the organizers. Also, as a reminder, the BSA Scouters Code directly states that Scouters do not engage in conversations about sexual conduct. We do not train leaders to have those conversations. However, conversations about identity are crucial to youth development, including those of sexual or gender identity. Also tonight, we have some generous donors who have sponsored signed copies of the book. So please stay on all the way, please stay all the way through the meeting. So at the end of the call, we will have Mike pick a few random numbers throughout the number of participants, and we will give away some signed copies of the books. We would like to thank Rob Ellis and BB Squared for donations towards these sponsored copies. So without further ado, Mike Curato is an author and illustrator. He is the creator of the Little Elliot series. His debut title, Little Elliot Big City, released in 2014 to critical acclaim. He has won several awards and has been translated into over 10 languages. There are now 5 books in the Little Elliot series, including Little Elliot Big Family, Little Elliot Big Fun, Little Elliot Fall Friends, and Merry Christmas, Little Elliot. He's also illustrated What If by Samantha Berger, All the Way to Havana by Margarita Engel, Worm Loves Worm by JJ Austrian, and contributed to What's Your Favorite Color by Eric Carl and Friends, and Sunny Day, a celebration of the Sesame Street theme song. He has 2 new books out in 2020. He illustrated The Power of One by Trudy Ludwig, and his first YA graphic novel, Flamer. Before we welcome Mr. Curato, I want to share the book trailer for those of you who have not yet read it. Thank you, Mike, for joining us tonight. How are you doing? You're still mute. Oh, I have to unmute you. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, goodness. Now, excuse me. Sorry about that. I thought I was being so smooth too. There we are.
Hello.
Hi, how are you tonight?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on. We're really excited to have you. So can you tell us about your scouting experience? Where in the country did you grow up? Was scouting a big part of your life, or was it a big part of your community?
Yeah. Well, I grew up kind of in the greater New York City area in the suburbs. Sorry. Of course, right when I start to talk, right? And I mean, scouting was pretty common where I grew up. I feel like a lot of boys started scouting really young and then kind of dropped out along the way. So you'd have like kind of a handful left by the time you got to high school. And it was a huge part of my life. And I was lucky enough to find the right troop. I started out in a different troop. It was not a good fit for me, and I dropped out of scouting. And then a friend from another town invited me to his troop. Um, so I tried it out, and it just kind of clicked. And I would go to meetings every week. They had awesome programming. We did an overnight hike once a month. We did summer camp every year. And then every few years we'd do a super adventure. So we'd go somewhere special, like for 2 weeks. Like we went to Puerto Rico once. We went down south. Usually it'd be like a week of summer camp plus like a bunch of other things on the side, like going to the beach or going to an amusement park. I went to Philmont one year, which was life-changing. And for those who don't know where Philmont is, it's a huge scout reservation in New Mexico. It's like thousands of acres, just untouched wilderness. And
I often refer to it as Boy Scout Mecca.
Yes, it's roughing it too. So
Yeah.
you're out there, you're stanky, making it work. But yeah, and I really I'm so thankful for my scouting experience because I made some really amazing friends who I still consider friends. And it really let me kind of grow into myself, and I learned a lot, and I got a lot of self-confidence from it. Yeah, I also
Awesome.
earned my eagle. Like I was hardcore. Like I was all about scouting.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So what other activities were a big part of your life?
Well, art has always been, sorry, my printer there. Art has always been number one. I've just always made art since I was a kid, since I could hold a pencil. I was always drawing. So that's always been number one. And I did some sports eventually in high school, non-contact sports like cross country and track, and one horrible season of JV tennis. And I was also very active in my church. I grew up Catholic, and I was an altar server. Church every Sunday. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to middle school, and then went to public high school. So, and if you
I
read the
might know a
book, that
character who had a similar
sounds kind
life
of
like
familiar.
that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So I think almost everybody on the call can appreciate that the book takes place over a week at summer camp. Why did you decide to organize the book in that way?
Well, first of all, I loved scout camp. It was like the highlight of my year. You know, I didn't really have it was kind of liberating, right? To like be away from home for so long and just like be with your friends the whole time. That's cool.
Yeah.
And I love nature. So, part of it is very much a love letter to that experience. Also, writing a book this size is really overwhelming. And the scout camp schedule actually was like the perfect structure for developing the plot. So the story takes place over the course of 1 week. So each day of the week is a chapter. Is a chapter. And then because the schedule is so regimented at camp, you have your merit badge classes and you have campfire every night. It just really helped me create a structure. And then I would just plug in the different things I wanted to talk about into the schedule for the week. So yeah, I knew I wanted to do it at camp. And maybe we'll talk more about this a little bit later, but kind of the climax of the book I talk about in the afterword is really based on something that happened to me at camp. So that's kind of the reason why it was based there. But there is a lot of love around exploring that environment.
I totally get it. I've been a summer camp director for the last 2 summers, and I live there, and people are like, "You work a lot," and I'm like, "I don't really care. I love being there." So
That's
I totally
awesome.
understand. Yeah. So the main character in your book is Aiden, and in the book, he experiences some bullying from some of his patrol mates. And I have to say, I love your depiction of scouting in the 90s. But when I talked to a good friend who works in middle school about it, she's like, "That's my everyday." And I was like, "Oh man."
Yeah.
But he experiences some bullying from some of his patrol mates, which he says they're people he likes, but doesn't really feel connected to them. And so, how did that? Can you talk about how bullying might sometimes overlap with friendship?
Yeah, totally. You know, I think there are several characters that Aiden. I think Aiden would like to be friends with everybody in his patrol, and while he is bullied by some guys from a different troop, but they're not. You know, they're just the bad guys, right? There's no friendship connection.
Right.
So I think some ways that it can kind of overlap is people don't really realize there's a lot of what people would call microaggressions, right? You know, like cis boys do a lot of chest pounding when they're teenagers, maybe trying to prove themselves to folks. So there's a lot of like smack talking and name calling. So you hear a lot of like derogatory terms thrown around, and you know, a lot of those can be homophobic or transphobic or any kind of phobic. It's in
Absolutely.
there, you know, racist stuff. And a lot of it is kind of just like thoughtless, right? It's just kind of like lazy digs.
Hmm.
Um, so there's that. Then there's another level, right? So Mark is a great great example in the book. He's a character in the book where you know, he like kind of seems like a friend, um, but I question if he is or not, because
Hmm.
Mark is someone who intervenes to be like, you know, Aiden's getting picked on, and Mark's like, well, you know, if you didn't
If you
act
weren't
a
so,
certain
yeah.
way,
Hmm.
then it wouldn't be a problem. Like you got to man up, you've got to, you know, it's like, why can't you just be normal,
Yeah.
right? So maybe in Mark's mind, he's trying to be a friend, to be like, oh, just conform to how everyone else is, and then you'll be fine. What's the problem? Which I think is a shared mentality with a lot of folks in our
For sure.
country,
Hmm.
and certainly something that I have experienced throughout my life, not just in scouting. Um, so yeah, and you know, the book does take place in the 90s, but I think it's still very relevant today. Um, you know, I mean, I'm not active in scouting right now, honestly, but I still travel throughout the country, and it, for me as an LGBTQ person, it still feels like 1995. As a person of color, it still feels like 1995. Um, and I don't always have to like travel very far to experience that. Like I've experienced, you know, really messed up things like living in New York City, and now
Yeah.
I'm in Western Massachusetts in Northampton. Um, you know, you still experience things wherever you are. So
For sure. Um, so Aiden's best friend is Violet, and they write every day. And there's a day where her letter doesn't come, and it is a day like he needed that letter that day, and it doesn't come, and he automatically assumes that she has abandoned him. And I just feel like teens today, so that was letter writing in the 90s, right? And so I wonder what your perspective is on that same feeling, only with text messaging and social media, and what are your thoughts on um, that instant gratification piece of that same feeling.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, it's even heightened now. And I experience that now, where it's like you're like texting with someone, and then all of a sudden, you're like in a text volley, and then they don't answer your last question. It's like, well, where did they go?
Right.
And meanwhile, it's like you don't know what's going on for them. You don't know if it's like, oh, a bus just passed by and this huge puddle like splashed them. They dropped their phone in the water and it's dead. Like you don't know that. You're just like, oh my God, they're not replying. Like
it's all about me.
Happening. Yeah. Like it's a lot to deal with. So it's very hard to kind of like take a deep breath and like have some patience. Another thing I just like to remind people is you don't know what's going on with someone else even. Like maybe you are having a bad day. Maybe they're having a bad day too. I mean, miscommunication happens all the time.
Yeah, it does.
So yeah, it's important, I think, when I start to panic, when I start to think like they're not replying, they're mad at me, they don't like me anymore. When I start going to that place, I try to like work on my breathing, which is a skill that I'm still working on with my therapist. Go back to the breathing, and feel the connection with the earth. If you're, if you can go outside and walk and breathe the air, you can just like lie down on the floor, ground yourself, like literally ground yourself.
Those are great advice for anybody, not just teenagers.
Oh yeah, I'm still doing it now.
I do. I'm just saying, like, I get in that same situation all the time. So in listening to some of your other press you've done for this book, I know that you've said that comics saved your life as a reader. I happen to have a young reader in my house who is a big fan of graphic novels. I will have to hide your book because he's not old enough to read it. But he's that kid who'll pick up anything. And so we'll have to hide it for a while. But you talk about how comics saved you as a reader. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. In like middle school, I felt really overwhelmed by reading novels. By just like a brick of paper with all words and no pictures was really intimidating. And, and I was, I was just like, that's boring. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to sit and read. Like and because I love art so much, I'm just like, where'd it go? Like, why would we get rid of the art? It makes no sense to me. So, like chapter books were cool because you'd have like an illustration to look forward to every now and then. But comic books were like, wow, like really exciting to me. I love the action. I love the costumes and the superpowers, and so I couldn't stop reading them. Like I used to hoard whatever leftover lunch money I had, and I would just spend it all on comics. I would even like eat less than I would want to, which is saying something because if you knew me, you would know that I like to eat a lot. Well,
your bio says you like ice cream and cupcakes. So
yeah, I could have had ice cream every day with my lunch if I wanted to. I could have gotten that drumstick, but I didn't. I saved it. And I bought every back issue of X-Men that I could.
That's really awesome. What do you, and I'm throwing this one at you. So what are your thoughts on kids reading comics if it gets them to read?
Absolutely, 100%. I think comic books are finally having their moment where they're beginning to be recognized as literature, because it is. And, I think some people might put their nose up at like a superhero comic book, but it's like, those superhero comic books are very loosely how I was able to see myself. I mean, part of the reason for writing Flamer is that I didn't see myself in books and on screen, but, I really connected with X-Men, as I said. It's like, was my big title because I could relate, right? I felt like an outcast, but I still had a superpower. And
yeah, we're going to talk about your superpower in a minute.
Yeah. And, you know, and I saw like Asian characters in there, you know, it gave me something to look up to and something to imagine possibilities with. So I would
And
say
some
by
of
all
those comic
means,
books at this point now have more volumes than,
yeah.
you know, they're longer. Those stories are longer than many of the books that are considered classics.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So,
So you know, it can only hopefully inspire more reading. Like I would think like a kid that wants to pick up a copy of Superman, you know, would be open to maybe trying out a graphic novel, which is awesome. We've got some amazing graphic novels out now, and that could be the gateway to like reading other types of books. So
absolutely. Thank you. Um, so like we've talked a little bit about X-Men already. Both you and Aiden are big fans of X-Men. And specifically Jean Grey,
that's
who
right.
happens to be my favorite X-Men character, but
Because
only because
you're a
I
smart
kind of sort of
person, I
look
can
like
see it.
her.
Yeah.
I'm tall, I'm redheaded, I don't have her body though.
Hey, but
And
you
certainly
have
not her
her mind.
superpowers.
Yeah.
Um, so what other comics shaped you as a writer and an artist?
Well, as far as comic books, I didn't really branch out from X-Men very much. I would, you know, I started out reading some Batman and Superman and kind of this and that, but I mean there are a lot of X books, so it's not just X-Men. It's like, you know, there are like a
There's a
bajillion
whole
different
series, yeah.
branches of it. So but then as I got older, I did kind of get curious about like graphic novels. And so as an adult, I started reading them and I was like blown away how some people took the comic medium and brought it to this new dimension. So books like Stitches by David Small, which is autobiographical. Also Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, which is also a queer book.
That musical is like heart-wrenching.
Oh yeah, I ugly cried during that musical in person, and I was trying to reach Kleenex out of my pocket, and I was like incidentally jangling my keys trying to get my my tissue, and this woman's like, shh. I'm like, I'm sorry. Anyway, also other influential comics, American Born Chinese by Jean Yang, like blew my mind. Like that was another life-changing book for me, seeing an Asian character that I could identify with. Even though the character's Chinese, it was still enough. It was still something. There was still something of a common experience. Also, This One Summer by Jillian and Tomiko Tamaki. Jillian and Mariko Tamaki, not Tomiko. Incredible.
I'm sure
I mean,
she's gonna watch this and harass you because you said her name.
Oh man. Yeah, there are so many great graphic novels coming out these days. It's an exciting time.
Making notes as you were talking because I'm a big fan of them. So that's awesome. So I know you talk about art as your superpower. You picked up, you know, you started doing art as soon as you could pick up a writing utensil of any kind. Did you always feel like it was a superpower, or did you become more proud of it as you grew into it?
Honestly, I was always really proud of it. Like I knew, I mean, some of my earliest memories were just like experiencing joy from drawing. And then as I got older, I realized that like people were impressed by that for some reason. I was like, oh, you can't do this. It's easy. You just
do it.
So then it became like a point of pride.
Awesome.
And yeah, I just always knew, I just was always working towards making art as what I did for my life.
Awesome. I know that this is a fictional story, but it is not so loosely based on your life. So can you talk about some of the similarities between Aiden and you?
Yeah, and actually just to segue, I'll talk about one big difference is that Aiden is not an artist in the
Right.
book by any stretch. Because part of
Although
it
he can make
was
baskets just pretty
he
well.
can make a basket,
At basket
unlike
weaving.
his poor friend David,
Right.
can make a bird's nest. But
Right.
I purposely didn't give Aiden my superpower because I think a lot of people, I think most people don't know what their superpower is when they're 14. I think we all have latent superpowers that we discover throughout our lives. Some of us get to figure that out early and some of us don't. So I wanted the main character to be someone that anyone could relate to in that regard, where they don't necessarily have, like, even in my dark moments, I was like, well, I have this one thing. Like I know there's this one special thing about me, and that was my art. But I know a lot of people that didn't have that. So but anyway, I like to think of Aiden, like Aiden and I are maybe like 80% the same. I like to think of him as like a more courageous version of me, because some of the stuff that he is strong enough to do, like I don't think I would have had the courage to. And yeah, other similarities. I did not know how to dress myself when I was 14. That's real talk. Actually, there's this image. Oh wait, I'll show it to you.
I can't dress myself.
There's this image of Aiden in his school uniform and then him trying to dress himself. And like, this is legit something I try to wear. Like, whoops, that took me a minute. And we both, are people that others come to with their problems. Right. So, Aiden's kind of perplexed. Like, I don't know why everyone's asking me like for advice about all this stuff, but it was, it's because Aiden, obviously is an emotionally intelligent person and others can sense that. And so of course they're going to like ask him like, well, what do you think about, what should I say to my girlfriend about this thing? Or, oh,
that was heartbreaking. I don't want to give it away, but it was heartbreaking.
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's life.
Yeah.
So Aiden experiences feelings of working so hard to be what he defines to be a good person, but then is struggling with these things that he thinks aren't. Were some of these the feelings that you had? And then the other piece is, what do you say to kids who are feeling this way?
I say that part of being a human being is trying to reconcile the different parts of ourselves that seem to be in conflict with each other. So, for example, here's another similarity between Aiden and me. Aiden is Catholic, right? And so the Catholic religion, at least when I was 14, was very homophobic. Things seem to be, I don't know about turning a corner, but it's a big moment when the Pope becomes accepting of queer people. That's a big moment. It's, could they have done it a lot sooner? Yeah, I won't get into that, but it was not okay. It was a sin, right? It's a sin to be homosexual, and you were basically damned. I mean, that's a lot to absorb as a teenage queer person. Like, oh, so I'm not supposed to exist. If I try to exist, then I'll be punished for it. If I try to be my true self, I will be punished for it. But that conflicts with Aiden because he believes like, but I'm doing my best. Like I try to be good. Like I don't want to do anything wrong. And like Aiden, I didn't have any queer role models to look up to. The only gay people I saw in the media were men dying of AIDS. And my church was saying that they deserved that they deserve to die for, this sin of being gay. And I didn't even really fully understand what being gay meant, because all I had ever heard was it being used as a derogatory word, or being described as sinful. So, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
And I witnessed, on TV, like how gay people were treated. And I heard, like boys and grown men, people who were supposed to be caretakers, so people who are supposed to look after me and my well-being, saying really scary things. And just knowing that potential for violence that could be used against me. That's a lot for anyone to handle at any age. But 14, it's like you don't have a lot of agency, especially, if you don't have guardians that are going to support you in that way, or a community that's going to support you and be like, we're here for you, we've got you. But I was too scared to even tell anybody. So no one even knew. Even the people that now I know would have had my back. They didn't know because it was just too scary to be out.
Oh, that's really heavy.
It is. But, what kept me going was knowing as few people as I could count. I knew that there were some people that really did care about me, and I didn't want to do anything to myself that would hurt them.
That's my next question. We're gonna go right there. So you have built a beautiful conduit to talk to teenagers about suicidal ideation and the feelings that they're having, and about the feelings that brought Aiden there. Is that part of what you were hoping to do?
Absolutely. So this is a bit of a spoiler alert and a little trigger warning. So in the acknowledgements, I talk about how when I was a teenager, I did have suicidal ideation, right? I thought about killing myself because of all the things we just talked about, because I was too scared to go into high school. I thought like maybe someone will try to kill me, or maybe I'll be like hurt a lot, and just everything felt too scary. And so that was very much the basis for writing the story. So there is a point at which Aiden needs to make a decision if he's going to stay or if he's going to go. And that was very much taken from my experience. And, I think part of what I believe is that we need to talk more about suicidal ideation, try to destigmatize it. It's a very hard thing to talk about, but we have to, because how will we be able to help ourselves or each other if we can't talk about it? So that's what I'm hoping, is that this book will open up some conversations and can hopefully be a lifeline for folks who are thinking about this until they can find their community. I do list 2 resources in the book, the Trevor Project and Glisten, as some resources. But yeah, the Trevor Project is an amazing advocate for queer youth. But they also have a 24-hour suicide hotline that is specifically designed for queer youth in mind. You know, there's the National Suicide Hotline as well, but I like to steer
for sure.
youth towards Trevor Project just to feel more support.
Awesome. So how did you evolve from writing books for littles? And I am totally calling Lexi. Actually, I already called Lexi to make an order. I have 2.5-year-old niece and nephew twins. So they will meet little Elliot this Christmas.
Oh, great.
But how did you evolve from writing books for littles to young adult fiction?
You know, oftentimes authors are encouraged to write the books that they wish they had when they were young, and this is just another book that I wish that I had. Maybe the most important one that I wish that I had when I was younger. So it's interesting because there's a lot in common between picture books and graphic novels. So there's a lot that I learned from that process that helped me make this. And then there was a bunch of stuff that was a big learning curve. I mean, it really helped being an avid comic book reader. And then I read books about making comics and graphic novels, but it's very different once you're finally in it. So, there were no cute elephants or cupcakes or sweet things. This was a lot more raw and emotionally draining. There would be some tough days where I'd either have to focus on some low-hanging fruit, like, illustrating the fart joke. That's okay, I can do that today, or doing some admin work. And then there were days where I was feeling pretty strong and just feeling really objective. And it's like, okay, we're going in and
dive in.
This is what we need to do. So yeah, it was a big difference, but so glad that I did it.
Awesome. I want to divert a little bit from Flamer, but we'll come back. Can we talk a little bit about Dear Heartbreak? Because I feel like what I've read about it is it's another great book for this audience. And so can you tell us about the book itself and your contribution?
Yeah, so Dear Heartbreak is a compilation of a bunch of different young adult authors. And actually, when it was published, I wasn't known as a YA author at the time. So I seem like a bit of an anomaly in there, but Flamer had been written and I was working on it.
You're right. We don't think you're an imposter.
Thanks. And basically the concept was that the editor, Heather Demetrios, kind of sent out this call for questions from youth around the country. If you could ask an author about a certain experience that you wanted advice about, what would it be? So, there were a bunch of queer folks that sent in some letters, and I answered someone's letter who had been having a really rough time in school. So that was me, and I wasn't out in high school even. But I wrote the letter to that person that I would write to myself if I were asking that question. So it was very, very personal.
It feels like a lot like the It Gets Better campaign from what I can read about it. I'm definitely going to go find it. Just that, so that kids can understand that what they feel is okay. And that they're not alone in what they feel, that somebody else has been there.
Yeah. And since you brought up the It Gets Better campaign, which I think is great, it exists, I like to say it could get better, right? I think there's this, I think queer adults really want to be able to tell, you know, youth like, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. But life is life, right? And I want to be realistic. And it's still going to be hard. It's still going to have hard moments. It's not like you come out and you meet your first love and then everything's going to be wonderful. But if you hang around, there's so much potential for awesome things to happen, and the bad things are still going to happen too. But for me, it's been worth it to experience the great stuff. So
awesome. I appreciate your adjustment there. In doing my research for tonight, I also realized that you participated in a book called Sunny Day, celebrating the 50th anniversary of Sesame Street. I am a ridiculous Sesame Street collector. I have something like 85 Elmos, and I'm not afraid to talk about that.
Awesome.
So can we talk, like, how did it feel working with such an iconic song and creating art based on that song?
I mean, it was pretty surreal, I think, for all of the artists involved. You know, the Sesame Street song is something we all grew up with, and it's kind of like a part of our childhood identities. And so I definitely felt some pressure there. You know, I wanted to do it justice. And it was cool that the art director, Martha Rago, said that she'd really love for there to be some not just like diversity in the people, but diversity in places, right? Because Sesame Street's, you know, very already known as like an urban setting. So I set mine on a beach in a kind of tropical climate. You know, still a diverse cast on my spread, but you know, I'm half Filipino, so I was trying to maybe represent some island life for folks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So sorry, now I have to go back to my questions. So who were some of the adults? So as an educator of teenagers, I know that having another adult in your life, or having an adult that you value in your life, decreases some at-risk behavior, decreases some challenging things that we all experience, but you have another outlet for that. Who were some of the adults that were important in your life?
I mean, I'm not even pandering here, but my scoutmaster was, or scout leader, you know, was very influential. Awesome. And he just really showed up. He showed up for all of us. He put in so much time into our programming and was there to listen. I think it's hard as a teenager to find an adult who wants to actually listen to you and not just like tell you things. So he was one, and my high school art teacher was another. So not only was she kind of nurturing me artistically, but she was someone that I really trusted, like someone else I knew I could confide in, someone I could go to if I had a problem with anybody. She worked at that school for like a million years, and everyone respected her, and you did not mess with her. Like,
got it.
Yeah. It was so funny. I remember one time it's like beginning of senior year, I think. And I got my schedule, and they had like removed my art classes for like physics or something, even when I didn't need any more science. And the guidance counselor was like, well, you know, college is like a more well-rounded student. I'm like, I'm applying to art college. Shouldn't I be? So I went to like Mrs. Nichols, told her what happened. She's like, give me that schedule. She came back like 15 minutes later and huff. She's like, here's your new schedule.
Nice. Like, see, like those are the adults you need in your life that are going to go to bat for you.
That's right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That's awesome. So our LGBTQ allies and scouts group is a lot of leaders who want to be ready for someone when they have something to share about their identity? And it's not necessarily an LGBTQ identity, but just something about themselves. What do you suggest, or what advice do you have for people who might be experiencing this, or might experience it in the future?
I think the key again is listening, and withholding judgment until you can, especially if it's something you don't have a lot of experience with or know anything about. I would just think of it as taking in information for you to do more research on later. So, if say it's so funny when some people are like, well, I don't know any queer people. It's like, you do though.
You do.
So
you're just not looking very hard.
Yeah. But like, so say you're one of these people that's just like, oh, I have nothing against, queer folks. I don't know anything about them. I don't know what to do. That's okay. But so if someone's coming out to you essentially in whatever regard, right? Like, I would just take it in and just reassure them that you're someone that they can trust. And that's it. And then, you could always ask them, like, is there anything you need from me? And I mean, that's the baseline, is establishing the trust, I think. And then I think it's important to do your research and not rely on the youth to teach you. Seek out other adults who are maybe looking for the same information. Seek out adults that do have the information, and maybe you can all have a conversation together. But yeah.
Awesome.
That's what I would say.
All right. So one super scouty question, and I didn't warn you about this one, but
Okay.
What was your favorite merit badge?
Oh my gosh.
So I'm looking at them, and some of them are still the same. So like your family life is still the same.
Family life, yeah.
Fire safety is. I'm looking at the
basket
pictures.
Weaving.
There's basket weaving. My co-teacher and I are teaching basket weaving January, February. So
cool. Well, I've got I think this is this canoeing or whitewater rafting? I did love canoeing so much. It was one of my favorite things. So I'm so glad I got that into the book. So I'm sure that was one of the better ones for me. I've got art merit badge, like better.
I just finished that one this week.
Archery. Yeah. Oh, cool. Congrats.
I teach it a lot. I just finished that one this week with
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I guess all the things that I
love to do,
that I like to do, right? Oh yeah, this one is collections, and I got that for comic books.
There you go.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I did put in the chat, and I'll say it out loud. If you have any questions, we're gonna have a quick Q&A with Mike. And I do have a couple already lined up.
Awesome.
So first they've asked me to preface that this is coming from CJ and Akiva, who you've actually connected with before.
Yes. How's it going?
And Akiva's question is, when Aiden is in the chapel, he has a vision of Jean Grey coming to him on pages 328 and 29. There's a double page spread up close of an up close depiction of what seems to be Aiden and Jean Grey merging. Can you speak to how this symbolized your own internal transformation as a queer teen scout?
Yes. So to clarify, that's actually not supposed to be Jean Grey. It's a reference, right? It's definitely referencing the concept of the phoenix, right? So that fiery figure is supposed to represent Aiden's soul. So Aiden is basically having a conversation with himself about his worth and why he should be there. And something I say in the afterword is, in our darkest moments, it's hard to sometimes believe and trust that there is something good in us, like, that there is light in us, and there is, even if you can't see it, right? And so for me, that whole scene just really represents, you know, when I was in that same situation, I was having a really honest conversation with myself, trying to make that decision and weighing the pros and cons, and just, you know, deciding ultimately if I was worth it. So yeah, so that is supposed to be kind of a visual, like, fantastic representation of the conversation I was having with myself when I was a teen.
Excellent, thank you. Akiva would also like to thank you from one queer Eagle Scout to another for talking about this huge issue from a scouting lens.
Oh, thanks,
something
Kiva.
that Akiva also does as well. But I think we all would like to thank you for talking about this from a scouting lens. This opens such a great conversation. Just scrolling down in my chat here. I know Rob would like one piece of advice that you might give to Scout leaders that they could do differently to create a more inclusive environment.
Differently. Well, I guess I don't know what your troop is like. I would say maybe if you don't have anyone who's out, well, regardless of whether or not you have anyone who's out, I would definitely tamper down any homophobic language that you hear among the Scouts. I feel like it's just still a thing, right? And there's a difference between being like, knock it off, you guys, and like starting a conversation about why should they stop saying that stuff, even if like they don't mean it. And yeah, I mean, I would like to think like, oh, maybe there could be some way for you to share something that would kind of signal inclusivity, like that your troop would be a welcoming place. What does that look like? I think that would be a brainstorming session.
For sure.
You could read a book together.
Yeah,
or
do a book study.
Yeah, you know, you could maybe celebrate Pride during a meeting and talk about queer history. You could talk about queer Scouts. Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting his name right now, but well, actually they're brothers, but the, you know, first out Eagle Scout who really
I bet Chuck Eaton could tell us this and he's on this call, so it'll pop up in the chat in a minute, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think he made a big difference. He made a big difference in my life, and I had already aged out of scouting, but to see someone who was brave enough to be like, I'm an Eagle Scout and I'm gay and I'm proud of that. And so yeah, I think that could be something, you know, like focusing on real Scouts with different backgrounds, not just queer, but
sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Sean wants to say first, thank you for being here with us in this space. He loves your concept that everyone has a superpower, but that most people just don't know what they are until they're older. It's so great that you understood your own superpower at such a young age, but he wants to know, do you think it's even more difficult for LGBTQ plus people to discover or feel their superpowers due to homophobia, bullying, and societal negative forces? Or do you think it could be just the opposite in a way, as a shield of sorts to fight back? A very cool concept to ponder.
Yeah, it is. I don't have the definitive answer for you. I think everyone's experience is different. And while queer folks can have a common experience, I think it's important not to label ourselves as like a monolith, right? Like we're not all the same. And that's just the point, right? Is getting other people to recognize us just as people, just as individuals. So that being said, I know for myself, I think the queer experience it definitely put me in situations, for example, like I rely on humor a lot, which is very gay, I think. Like, I can, I've used humor as a defense mechanism. I've used it as a way to kind of mitigate whatever horror I'm trying to live through. So, I'm kind of funny now. Like it's a sharpened tool in my kit, I guess. So the point you made about that, I think that can be true, that maybe because you feel marginalized, it kind of like you're like reaching within yourself, like, what do I have? What do I have to fight back with? What do I have to make myself happy? It can bring about, your latent superpowers, I think.
Absolutely. All right, so I have one new message, and then we're going to give away some books.
All right.
Oh, so Chuck, you can like spitting out as many things as you can think about who like out gay scouts early on in the process. So Pascal was the first gay scout hired by the Greater New York Council, and he has a brother who is a recent advocate for changing the policy. That might be him. That you were talking about. Randy Price was a meteorologist in the Boston area. And so I told you he would come up with all these different ones. James Dale is the court case that began in the 80s. So anyway, all right, so we're going to give away some books, and my trusty assistant Zach has already grabbed names for me, so you don't even have to pick numbers. So I have to scroll back up. Here we go. Akiva and CJ, Alex, Matcha Marshy, Anna B, Kathleen B, Kat Q, Kelly H, Lisa Nichols are all going to get signed copies of the book. Again, thank you to our sponsors who sponsored the books, BB Squared and Rob Ellis. And we are so, I was just told that Akiva and CJ already has a signed copy, so they've asked me to pick someone else. You know what, we will hold on to that in the council so that if we found a scout who is in need of it, we can pass it on. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Thank you, Mike, so much for joining me. I am so happy to get to chat with you, and I definitely plan on making a trip out to Northampton when it's a little less nerve-wracking to do so.
Yeah. And thank you so much for inviting me. Like, this actually means so much to me. Like, this is really special to be able to like talk to other scouts about this book. And I do want to share that some of my friends from my troop read the book and were so supportive. So it's just really beautiful, like that, things are evolving. So I just want to encourage you all to keep fighting the good fight, and
we will
be the best you can be.
Awesome. So thank you everybody for joining us. We really appreciate you coming to our first speaker series for the LGBTQ plus Allies and Scouts group. There will be others, so if you're not already part of the Facebook group, I request that you join, and let me know you were here when you answer the questions to join the group, and I will add you in. And we are working on some other programming for other out scouts who can talk about their experiences. So thanks, Mike, for being our first one.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.